I always thought Christmas was supposed to feel warm, but that night, standing in my parents' living room, I felt every light in the house dim at once. My sister raised her glass, looked straight at me, and said clearly enough for the entire family to hear, "Mom is leaving everything to me." The cheers that followed hit me harder than the words ever could. My parents didn't look my way. No one did. I didn't argue. I didn't break. I just turned to my dad and asked one quiet question, one that made his hand tremble and the entire house freeze. And that moment wasn't even the real beginning. If you had asked anyone what my family was like when I was growing up, they would have told you we were close. That was the word people used when they saw us at church events, school plays, or neighborhood gatherings. My mother beaming, my sister Avery soaking up every compliment, my dad keeping the peace with quiet nods, and me somewhere on the side holding the coat pile or carrying the leftovers. From the outside, we looked perfectly balanced. But families can look balanced even when the weight inside them is crushing one person more than everyone else. Avery was the sun in our household. Everything revolved around her. Her school projects, her soccer tournaments, her important friendships, her bright future. My mother narrated it like a script she'd memorized. She didn't do chores, she had potential. I did most of the cooking and cleaning because I was responsible. And the way my mother said responsible always sounded suspiciously like less. I learned to live in the background long before I understood what that meant. On holidays, the contrast sharpened. Avery's gifts were wrapped in thick ribbon with little cards written in my mother's neat cursive. Mine were practical things, the kind you couldn't complain about without sounding ungrateful. Socks, planners, a scarf she bought 2 minutes before checkout. Every Christmas picture had Avery in the middle, framed like a centerpiece. I was somewhere beside her, half lit by the tree, half fading into the wall. My dad noticed things, the small imbalances, the bigger ones. He'd slip me the nicer slice of pie after everyone left the table or ask me how work was going when the rest of the family forgot I had a job at all. He wasn't loud, but he was present. And sometimes presence feels like the only raft in a storm. The older we got, the more obvious everything became. Avery moved through life like someone expecting applause. She'd walk into a room and assume it was waiting for her. My mother encouraged it with every nod, every smile that stretched too wide, every story she told about Avery's accomplishments, some exaggerated, some almost true. All of them polished. Meanwhile, I worked quietly, lived quietly, and showed up for everyone, especially my father. When he was hospitalized a few years ago, I stayed overnight in a stiff chair listening to the rhythmic hum of the machines. Avery came once, left early, and posted a picture on social media about family time. I didn't resent her. I just adapted around her like everyone else, but this Christmas felt different from the moment I stepped through the door. Maybe it was the way my mother looked at Avery, almost relieved. Maybe it was the forced cheer in her voice, or the way she glanced at me like she was checking whether I'd stay out of the way. Or maybe it was the quiet tension in my dad's eyes. Something waited. Something waiting. Christmas Eve always made me wonder whether love in our family was real or rehearsed. By the time the guests started arriving, the house felt too small for the number of voices bouncing off the walls. Coats piled onto the sofa, boots lined the hallway, and the smell of roasted dinner mixed with pine and cold air every time the door opened. I moved through the noise like someone threading between tides, steady, quiet, unnoticed. Avery, of course, didn't move at all. She floated. She stood near the fireplace in a deep green dress, dim light catching in her hair like she'd been staged for a catalog photo. Every new relative who walked in made a beeline toward her. "You look stunning, sweetheart. Your mother must be so proud. You've always had that star quality." I was close enough to hear every word, but far enough that no one thought to include me. I kept bringing out trays from the kitchen, crackers, cheese-refilled drinks, while Avery talked about her job, her plans, her busy life. My mother hovered beside her, nodding, adding little comments like punctuation marks. "That's why Avery will be managing things when we're older," she said once. Loud enough for the whole living room to hear. "She just has the natural leadership." It was meant to sound casual. It wasn't. A few relatives glanced at me, quick, polite looks people give the sibling who wasn't chosen. I felt the familiar pinch in my chest but swallowed it down. I'd lived with those comments my whole life. They didn't crush me anymore. They just pressed a bruise that never fully healed, I slipped back into the kitchen, letting the laughter fade behind me. My dad was standing at the counter pretending to adjust the temperature on the oven, even though it wasn't on. The moment he saw me, his shoulders softened. "You holding up?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I lied. He studied me for a moment, the kind of look that felt like he was choosing words he wasn't ready to say. Then he gave a small nod, like he'd made some internal decision. "Stay close tonight," he murmured, "just stay close." Before I could ask what he meant, someone called for him from the other room. Breaking the moment, when I carried out the next tray, Avery was standing in the middle of the living room telling a story about a major opportunity she was sure she'd get. My mother jumped into it how Avery always landed on her feet and how some people were just born meant to carry the family forward. The implication wasn't subtle. It never was. Dinner began, conversation layered over conversation. My cousin complimented Avery's dress. My aunt asked about her future plans. My mother announced at one point that Avery had the right temperament to handle family responsibilities. People nodded as if they already understood what that meant. The table felt lopsided, like all the attention was leaning to one side, tipping the rest of us downward. My dad met my eyes across the table and gave the smallest shake of his head, like he knew the balance was about to break, and it did just moments later. Because even though I didn't know what was coming, even though I didn't know Avery was seconds away from detonating the night my dad did, and that knowledge sat in the room like a quiet storm, waiting for the first crack. Dinner plates were still warm when the evening slipped into that strange lull, the moment between courses. When the room exhales, people lean back, and conversations stretch into softer threads. But under it all, something in the house felt tight, pulled, like the walls were listening. My mother stood up to refill drinks, and as she passed behind Avery, she rested a hand on her shoulder with deliberate pride. "This is the year things really come together," she said. "Avery's ready to take on more. She'll be handling the important family matters moving forward." No one asked what that meant. They didn't need to. Everyone had heard versions of it before. Avery smiled like she'd been handed a crown. "Well, someone has to keep things running," she said, trying to sound humble but failing miserably. "Mom and I talk about it all the time. She trusts me, and why wouldn't she?" my mother added. "You've always been reliable." The fork in my hand paused midair. Reliable. It was the word she used for Avery today, the word she used for me only when she wanted something done without argument. An aunt across the table glanced at me, gave a sympathetic smile that didn't land. I wasn't sure whether she felt bad or just felt awkward. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, needing a breath. The house was warm, but I felt cold. Like the insulation between me and the rest of them had finally thinned to nothing. As I leaned against the wall, a memory surfaced uninvited. 3 winters ago, my dad had been in the hospital for a week. Avery stopped by once, took a picture of her coffee beside his bed, then left early because she had a dinner thing. I stayed. Every night, half asleep in those stiff vinyl chairs, adjusting his blankets, learning the rhythm of monitors. Nurses would peek in and whisper, "You're a good daughter." My mother never once thanked me, but she thanked Avery for showing up when it mattered. Remembering that now made my eyes sting. I walked into the garage to steady myself. The cold air hit my face, clearing the fog. The same string lights my dad hung years ago still lined the shelves, small, warm bulbs that flickered like they were holding on out of loyalty. He and I used to talk out here when I was younger, when Avery was too busy being admired to notice. As I stood there staring at the tools on the wall, my dad stepped inside. "You okay?" he asked. I hesitated. "Mom's making it pretty clear who she wants running things." He nodded, eyes softening. "She's been doing that for years." "I know," I said quietly, "but tonight it feels like she's erasing me entirely." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been carrying the weight of that truth for too long. "Emily," he said, stepping closer, "you're not invisible. Not to everyone." His voice had a tremor, small but telling. I searched his face. Something was there, something heavy he hadn't said. "Dad, is there something I should know?" He didn't answer. Not directly. He just placed a hand on my shoulder, firm and grounding. "Just be steady tonight," he whispered. "Some truths need the right moment to be spoken." Before I could ask anything else, someone called from the living room. And just like that, the moment broke. But my father's words didn't leave me. They settled in my chest like an ember, quiet, waiting, and I didn't know it yet, but that ember was seconds away from catching fire when we walked back into the living room. Something in the air had shifted. The chatter was louder, looser. Fueled by wine and the illusion of holiday peace. The fire crackled softly, throwing gold light across the room. Avery stood near the center, exactly where she always ended up, like gravity bent toward her. My mother hovered beside her, refilling her glass before she even asked. Someone clinked a spoon against a wine glass. Speech, a cousin called out. "It's Christmas, Avery. Say something." Of course they wanted her to speak. Avery never missed a stage. She lifted her glass, smiling like a woman who knew she already had the room. "Well," she began, "this year has been special, and tonight is even more special." She paused just long enough for anticipation to thicken. "Because Mom and I have been talking," she said, glancing at my mother with rehearsed affection, "and Mom is leaving everything to me." The words fell like ornaments crashing to the floor. For a moment, I thought I misheard, but then the room erupted. Applause, laughter, cheers, people raising their glasses like a royal coronation had just taken place. The room cheered. My mother beamed with blatant pride, nodding as if she expected this reaction, as if it confirmed something she had believed her whole life. Avery shone under their attention. "We've discussed it for months," she continued, milking the admiration. "Mom wants to make sure things stay organized, and she knows I'm the one who can handle it." My stomach tightened, not just from the words, but from how easily they came. How confidently she claimed what had never even been offered to me. No one looked in my direction. No one asked if this hurt. No one asked if it was fair. My dad stood across the room, posture stiff, jaw set, eyes unmoving. If the room was celebrating, he was the only still point in it, the only one who wasn't swept up in Avery's performance. My mother raised her glass again. "Let's toast," she said to Avery. "The future of this family." Glasses touched. People cheered louder. My heart beat in painful pulses. I didn't stand. I didn't lift my glass. My father noticed. Avery's voice floated above the noise. "Oh, come on, Emily," she said, laughing lightly. "Be a good sport. You know this stuff isn't your thing." There it was. The familiar dismissal dressed up as humor, the little jab that landed exactly where she aimed it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me went still. Not broken, not shaking. Just still. In that stillness, a dozen Christmases flashed through my mind. A dozen moments my mother pushed me aside so Avery could shine. A dozen times my father watched quietly, storing something behind his eyes. A dozen nights in the hospital chair when I held his hand while Avery updated her social media from a restaurant. And suddenly, the silence inside me shaped itself into one clear thought. Enough. I stood slowly. The noise dimmed around me like someone turning a dial. People noticed movement, heads turning. My mother frowned. "Emily, sit down," she whispered sharply. Avery smirked. "This isn't about you." But I wasn't looking at either of them. I turned to my father. "Dad," I said, voice steady. "Want to share the real news?" It hit the room like a dropped plate. His hand shook. It was subtle, barely visible, but undeniable. My father, a man who stayed calm in every storm, shifted his weight, eyes flicking from me to the guests to my mother. A tremor moved through his fingers as he reached for the envelope tucked behind a stack of napkins on the side table. Avery's smile faltered. "What news?" she snapped, the sweetness gone, her voice cracking at the edge. "Dad, what news?" The house fell silent. Every sound shut down at once. The laughter, the clinking glasses, even the crackle of the fire seemed to hush. The silence pressed in thick and expectant. My father stepped forward. The envelope shook in his hand. "I wasn't planning to do this tonight," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of something long held. "But since we're making announcements," my mother's smile stiffened. "What are you doing?" He didn't look at her. Not once. He opened the envelope and pulled out a set of documents. "I updated my will months ago," he said, projecting his voice now, letting each word fall clean and heavy. "Everything I own, my savings, my property, my investments, goes to Emily." A gasp sliced through the silence. My mother's hand flew to her chest. "What, you can't?" "We discussed." "No," he said, finally turning to her. "You discussed. You planned. You pushed. But you didn't ask me." And you didn't treat both our daughters fairly." Avery stepped forward, panic flooding her face. "Dad, this is insane. Mom already said, I don't care what your mother said." His voice cracked like a whip. "She can leave you whatever she has. But my estate, everything I've worked for, goes to the child who stood by me, the child who showed up, the child who cared." His gaze landed on me. Avery's face twisted. "You're punishing me because I have a life. Because I don't babysit everyone's feelings." "No," he said quietly. "Because you only show up when it benefits you." My mother grabbed his arm. "You're making a scene." He shook her off gently but firmly. "The only scene being made tonight is the one you two created by turning this family into a competition." Avery's voice rose, frantic. "This isn't fair. You can't do this. You can't just hand everything to her." "Fair?" My father's voice softened in the saddest way. "You want to talk about fair?" He looked at me again. And in that moment, the weight of every unspoken thing between us filled the room. The hospital nights, the quiet conversations in the garage, the way I had been present in ways no one else noticed. When he spoke again, his voice broke. "One of my daughters treated me like an obligation," he said. "The other treated me like family." Avery's mouth fell open. My mother stepped back as if the words physically hit her. No one moved. No one breathed. The silence cracked first, then everything else did. The shouting started almost immediately. Avery spun toward my mother, demanding explanations she clearly thought she was owed. My mother fired back, her voice sharp, her pride shattered in front of the very people she'd tried so hard to impress. Their argument tangled into a mess of blame and denial, each trying to rewrite the moment that had just unfolded. My father didn't say another word. He simply stepped to my side, placing a steady hand on my back, a quiet declaration that needed no audience. For the first time all night, I felt the ground beneath me stop tilting. Relatives avoided eye contact, unsure where to stand now that the room's brightest light had flickered out. Some nodded at me with an awkward sort of respect, like they were realizing they'd been applauding the wrong person for years. I slipped toward the front door, pulling my coat around me as the cold December air rushed in. Snow drifted under the porch light, soft and slow, like the world outside had no idea my life had just split open in the best possible way. For the first time in years, I felt the cold and it didn't hurt. Walking down the quiet street, I realized something simple. Family isn't defined by who shines the brightest, but by who stands beside you when no one's watching. That night didn't break me. It finally set me free. If you've ever been treated like the invisible one, tell me your story below. I read every comment. And if this hit home for you, stay with me. There are more stories coming, and you won't want to miss the next.